Hello everybody, it's 2021, a new chapter and a new beginning in our lives, away from the crap that is 2020 and in with a hope for a better tomorrow. It is also my very last day in the military, as you can probably tell from my face. Now, the last day of service is one of the greatest days in the lives of many a young lad, filled with tremendous, unspeakable joy as the thought of eternal freedom looms ahead. In the US, they call it the DD-214, but in my country, we call it the ORD. Now, if you aren't entirely familiar with how the army works, well, it's perfectly understandable. I wish I didn't, but unfortunately, I'm cursed with this knowledge, so might as well share it. So if you weren't aware of this, my country's military, being the Singapore Armed Forces, is a conscript army, meaning that all males aged above 16 and a half are required by law to serve around 2 years in the military. Now, this is no small matter. It isn't optional and there is no flexibility to when you can serve. Most people will serve around age 18 to 25, usually before they go university or out into the workforce. Other countries with similar conscript programs include Israel, South Korea and Finland. Fun fact, the Singapore Armed Forces was actually modelled after the Israel Defence Force after we gained our independence in 1965. Now, this arrangement was covert at the time because of political reasons, with Israel sending military advisors to Singapore, with the SAF eventually becoming modelled after the IDF. Fast forward to the present day, 2021, and this conscript system is still in place. Now, I'm not going to debate the issues surrounding the national service system because, quite frankly, I'm quite tired of entertaining the same conversations over the past 2 years about NS, and I would quite like to forget that it all ever happened. But for my very last day in service, I thought it would be nice to commemorate these past 2 years and take a stroll down memory lane. So let's rewind the clock back to my enlistment date, the world pre-COVID. Remember that?
How could this happen to me?
Me and a whole bunch of sad-to-be recruits show up to the meeting point, awaiting our bus to take 2 basic military training. Our family was with us. We took the bus down to the SAF ferry terminal and we boarded the ferry to Tekong Island. Now, if you haven't had the pleasure of sitting in that iconic penguin ferry before, let me tell you, the first time on that ferry brings out the most complex feelings you can experience in your life thus far, as you contemplate how bad the next 2 years of your life will be. You hear scary stories from your friends and relatives about the crazy warrant officers who empty your cupboards from the 5th floor down to the parade square, who make you run far away into the distance to touch that tree and run back. The spooky, creepy figures that only seem to disturb child recruits at between 3 to 5 AM in your smelly 16-man bunk. Ah yes, Tekong. Now, as you step foot onto Tekong Island, the gravity of this situation you have found yourself in hasn't hit you just yet, as you unceremoniously hand over your identity card to the guy that is registering you, not fully realizing that this will be the last time in 2 whole years you will see that beloved card. Your head gets shaved, you swap your civilian clothing for a green one, tie up your bootlaces, dash down the stairs to stand still for an arduous amount of time. BMT. Truly an experience like no other. Even after all those years, many an old bird can still recall the fun adventures of the times in BMT. Cracking jokes with your bunkmates while you're all in your underwear, panicking about any small indiscretion because you're so scared that you'll be punished. And of course, who can forget the first time you spent sleeping out in the jungle? 9 weeks seemed like an eternity when you're in Tekong, but to be quite honest, it passes really fast. And at the end of BMT, you'll do a really long march down to Marina Bay, roughly 24 kilometers, go onto the Marina Bay floating platform, throw your jockey caps high in the air as you celebrate your passing out parade. You are finally a trained soldier. Now, after BMT, this is where everybody's path diverges. Some will go off to the army, some the Air Force, and others the Navy. A few rare case soldiers will be transferred out of the military to the Singapore Police Force or the Singapore Civil Defence Force, which, by the way, is another avenue for Singaporeans to serve their 2 years of national service. But for the rest of us, it's going to be one of 3 main routes: officers, specialists or sergeants, and of course, the good old enlistees, otherwise known as men. Now, the most coveted of these 3 routes is of course the officer route, this being a 9-month-long course at the Officer Cadet School, otherwise known as OCS, where officer cadets are groomed to be the main face of the SAF and military leaders amongst their men. Officers usually take on the role of platoon commanders, or junior staff roles if they are in an office setting. Most people that take their national service seriously strive to become an officer because, like it or not, being an officer does give a 19-year-old an inordinate amount of power, as well as quite a hefty increase in the monthly stipend that you receive compared to their specialists or men counterparts. Now next up are the specialists or the sergeants. Now I don't know why they call them specialists, because being a sergeant is basically the most general thing you could do in the army. They are expected to be the middleman between the officers and the men. Sergeants in the SAF do a 5-month-long course at the Specialist Cadet School, or SCS, where they will go through an abridged and shortened version of what their officer counterparts will learn. Which of course brings me to the last group, the most underappreciated group of them all, the hardy soldiers at the bottom of the totem pole, all severely underpaid and mostly just wanting the 2 years to be over with. These legendary troopers form the backbone of the army and will spend a few months doing their vocational training before they are posted out to their unit, which is basically the company that they work under in military terms, where they will be undertaking their vocation-specific roles till the end of their service. Now in my case, I left the BMT as a man, as soldiers from the company that I was from in Tekong were mostly sent to non-combat roles, where there aren't as many officers or sergeants. Eventually I worked my way up the ranks and got the opportunity to go for a man to sergeant conversion course. And this was probably the most fun that I had in my 2 years of military service. Now if you ever served in a non-combat logistical or support role in the military, you know how drastically different your lives are compared to your combatant counterparts. We spend most of our days in offices, workshops, or warehouses, doing inventory, repairing trucks, or basic administrative work. It's an honest living, but it gets pretty stale after a while. So the injection of some adventure into my life, or chong sua as we like to call it in army lingo, was a welcome addition. So that was a little glimpse of my last day of service. Now obviously I can't film in the camp, but I can roughly tell you what happened. I bought some pizzas for my campmates, gave a speech, fist bumped my commander, and last but certainly not least, take back that beloved identity card of mine and reclaim the life that I once knew as a civilian. Looking back, I really enjoyed those 2 years. Though I didn't end up jumping off airplanes, doing hostage rescue, or going through ranger course. It is really true that every soldier plays an important role in the military, and I'm happy that I got to experience the logistical side of the army, which most people take for granted. So that was a little taste of what life in the military is like for a conscript soldier. Now if you served in the military before, leave down in the comments below what was your experience in the military, what was your role and whether you liked it or not. Because it's always interesting learning about the different roles and perspectives that are in the military. It truly is an interesting place to work at. Anyways, Owadilo, and I'll see you in the next one.
六月23是歹日子，阿是小弟的立平时，七早八早来坐的士，到尾仔来到我先比比啊，哎呦哎呦哎哎呦啊，哎呦哎呦哎哎呦，当我来到我先比比，边头手起红电机，叫我入去摘玻璃，然后送我去爱地里啊。